biochemistry. And while I really enjoy all aspects of endocrinology, the most common things you would see are diabetes and thyroid disease anyway, and we have pituitary and, bone disease. But clearly, if you're, going to be out in general practice, you're going to see mainly diabetes and thyroid disease. And so that's kind of like diabetes called me. And
gotcha.
yeah, because there's such a need for it. Plus, I have family members. I don't think there's really anyone who doesn't have someone with diabetes in their family, and so they're personally touched by the disorder. And insulin is a hormone, and like I said, I've studied insulin basic science, secretion, and then also how to use different insulins in the clinical setting, and also in the clinical research trials. So while I enjoy all of endocrinology, I think diabetes is really the paradigm for understanding all hormone based therapies. And as I explained when we're teaching this, insulin's another hormone. And you have to think of it that way, which means you have to look at the end organ interaction. So you have insulin, but the end organ, reaction to it, be it the brain, be it the muscle, or and so we're not looking at insulin in a vacuum, just like we're not looking at thyroid hormone in a vacuum. You're looking at the hormone and how it interacts in the body. And so you're looking at what precedes it and then what happens after it interacts with its receptor. So downstream effects. And so, that to me is really the critical part. It's easy to kind of take these things out and put them in a dish and then try to explain, have some observation. But when we are teaching this, or you mentioned medical communications, when we are trying to explain this to medical students, residents, and fellows, we are trying to put it in perspective of the whole patient, when we're doing this in a clinical fashion. And I think that's really, when they said diabetes trends, that to me is really what is happening nowadays. When I trained, 40 years ago when I was a student, everything was kind of isolated. Now we're trying to put everything back into the patient and really understand how these therapies work, not just on controlling blood sugar, but side effects, patient acceptability. So a lot more kind of holistic approach. And I think that is really where I see diabetes trending. And I think that's exciting because it's so much more worldly and so much more important to really put everything together. And when we are speaking, we're usually, outside of the medical, in the hospital, if we're communicating to primary care physicians who take care of most of the people with diabetes, about 30 million people with diabetes. So there are only about 6,500 board-certified endocrine specialists in the whole country. So obviously the majority of people taking care are primary care, either physicians or, mid-levels, nurse practitioners, PAs. And so it's our goal to try to explain these newer therapies in context of their everyday care, which is what the primary care is doing. So I think that is kind of a trend moving forward.
Gotcha.
In diabetes therapies, yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about this trend about taking a more holistic approach and not just looking at insulin, in a vacuum, but actually. Right.
Right. Insulin and glucose in a vacuum. Right.
Right. Right. Can you give me kind